Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 16th regular business board meeting of the Lower Merion School District. I'm Melissa Gilbert. I'm president of the board. Welcome to everyone. This meeting is being made public through Zoom. It's being live streamed and is being video recorded with sound for the purpose of public broadcast. All participants will be muted upon entry. There will be time allocated for public comment before we vote on action items. You may give comment on any issue. There'll be one public comment period, which public comment will be given through the chat feature on any topic, and then will be read by Ken Roos, the district solicitor. We'll give you more information about that. And I will now turn it over to Superintendent Copeland.
Thank you, Dr. Gilbert. Welcome everyone this evening. If you attended the meeting last week, you know that we had begun to talk a little bit about our Health and Safety Committee, what possible recommendations would be made. Speaking with officials from Children's Hospital and the concern of moving into the colder weather and the surge in COVID-19, we began looking at some options, particularly options surrounding what takes place after Thanksgiving. And that was our focus. As the week progressed, because our numbers, while growing, still looked like we would be able to get this weekend and trying to make a decision about the following week. Our intent was to have everybody in K through 12 this week. And then an article appeared in the Inquirer that gave a significant pause. Dr. Rubin specifically shared great concern over in-person teaching and learning. And let me also emphasize by saying, you've heard me say this before, I've been astounded at how well the in-person instruction is going. So we wanted to do everything we could to keep it going as much as we could. We became concerned about not really making a decision based on what we read in the newspaper, so we waited till we could have a meeting with Dr. Rubin specifically. And we talked about the pluses and minuses about going forward. We also then recognized that Montgomery County was going to take a vote Friday about whether the entire county was going to be shut down. Everybody knows that vote took place, and from November 23rd through December 4th, schools will be closed in the county. At any rate, our intent was still to have everybody come back this week, K through 12. What took place was we had an outbreak. We had an outbreak amongst our bus drivers and our transportation fleet. We're starting to have a number of bus drivers and transportation and bus aides who were testing positive or were symptomatic, to the point where, in consultation with the county, it was declared an outbreak amongst the transportation. And so what we decided to do was to, last week we had everybody have the option of finding their way to schools without transportation. And what we noticed was that there was a significant population that were having trouble getting to school. And our guidance counselors, our principals, knows the families, knows the situation. We were getting emails actually from children who were saying, I can't get to school and so forth. And our elementary program is not like our secondary program where students can stream in. And so therefore, we made the decision, which seemed counterintuitive, to allow the secondary to come in, but to say, for the sake of equity for those kids who couldn't come in, to have our elementary school students go to remote. But again, the concept was, because of the way we set up the secondary with some streaming capabilities, we felt students could opt to stay home and still have regular school. So that's what we did. And we started today with the expectation that our secondary students would be able to stay in school with our elementary school students remote. And we opened up Monday morning with, again, a series of students who were symptomatic, adults who were symptomatic, and it became, necessary to really bring in the county. And we had a meeting, Terry Quinlan, myself, some other senior administrators, and they made the recommendation that we go to virtual for everyone in the start for the remainder of the week. Just some things that I think I'd like to mention that I don't know that everybody knows. Right now, the expectation was that the county was going to lead the way with contact tracing. And this is not a criticism of the county. In fact, doctors have told us that Montgomery County probably leads the state in terms of the quality that they provide. But the contact tracing has really been done by our staff. It's really about Terry, it's you and 3 other nurses who are doing the contact tracing. We've not received any word from Montgomery County about anybody being COVID positive. That's all been information that we've received from parents, students, or staff. One of the other things that is a statewide issue is there's no coordination between health departments. So if somebody in Delaware County or Philadelphia County or Chester County tests positive, but they work in Montgomery County, that information is not transmitted to the Montgomery County Department of Health. So there's been a growing concern that our numbers are not representative of the situation that may very well be occurring in our schools. And that's been a discussion that we've heard from both Dr. Rubin and Dr. Coffin. So we've been monitoring the situation and closely looking at what's happening, and we see the numbers growing. So it was not an easy decision to make the decision this afternoon to go to remote for our secondary schools. But when the numbers jumped up and we were starting to make connections between the transportation department and students, it just became not just a prudent thing to do, but an important thing to do. And that's what we did as the county advised us. So when you start to look at our dashboard, you say, well, it doesn't look that bad, but the numbers are growing exponentially. So we think it is. That's where we are. You're going to hear about where we are with athletics in a second. So that's some doom and gloom, and that's some unfortunate situation. And again, let me emphasize, I really and the team really wanted to see us have a very different kind of week this week. We just felt that it could not happen. Here's the good news. Children's Hospital is online for some rapid testing. They're going to do the rapid testing in 2 phases. The first phase is from Thanksgiving through January, and the second phase is from January on. We have asked to be in the first phase of rapid testing, and we hope to begin that process right around after the Thanksgiving break. And that will give us the opportunity to do a more thorough testing, and we think that that's going to help us be able to stay in school longer. In my last conversation with Dr. Rubin, he feels that this kind of a situation, along with the strides that are being made, he's cautiously optimistic that we're going to be fully back at some time in the spring. And so that's our goal. It's not next fall, but this spring. But we think we have to take these steps to make sure that when we come back safely. And again, it's aspirational, but this is the first time I'm really getting a sense that it's aspirational with a sense of that it can happen. So that's the predicate that we were dealing with as we began to include where we're going with our athletic. And before I turn it over to the board for questions, I'd just like Jason Stroop, who's the athletic and activities director of Lower Marion High School. He's representing the district tonight. Jason, could you give an overview of?
Bob, I'm
Oh,
sorry. Yeah. Can we actually just have a few questions on that before we move on
Sure.
to the athletics?
Sure.
Just one moment, because I know there were a few questions from board members more generally.
Sure, that's fine.
If board members can, use the raise hand in the panelists. Shayna Kalish.
Thank you, Dr. Gilbert. Mr. Copeland, I'm wondering when you're talking about testing, who that will be available to. Is that primarily going to be targeted at staff or at students? And is it more as sort of a baseline testing the general population, or is it going to be reserved for people who are symptomatic or potentially exposed?
My understanding is it's testing that you can administer actually yourself. Students probably wouldn't be able to. They call it a sentinel testing, and now I'll turn it over to Terry because he's just inspired my knowledge.
Well, I haven't seen the complete information about CHOPS, what they're going to be implementing, but I believe they're setting up protocols now, and they have asked districts who want to be involved to submit certain information about their staff and so forth. I think that depending on the numbers of tests that they can procure, that they would be looking at priority groups first, say symptomatic people, special education staff, teaching staff, special education students. So I have to become familiarized with everything that they plan to offer.
We just got notification.
Yeah.
We just got notification on Sunday. So
that's fantastic. I think in light of this past week, though, we should also try and, if possible, get our transportation staff on that list of priority people.
Oh, sure.
Mr. Mooring?
Thank you. One question, particularly with the county mandated closing in both this week and next week, how are we addressing that with the staff? I know before when we were virtual, the teachers were coming in to teach, whether or not, given where we are now, if we're still planning to bring them in.
Yeah, our standard has really been staff come in when students are in the building. If students aren't in the building, we were comfortable giving staff the option of coming in.
Thank you.
Some have asked to come in, so we don't read the order as saying that people can't be in the buildings. We read the order as school can't happen. That doesn't mean that people can't come in the building, but it'll be their option.
Ms. Ackman?
Thank you, and I think that's great news about the testing. And Terry, thanks for the additional context. I guess my question is, would it be useful or even feasible if we developed our own volunteer corps of contact tracers to get us through this period? I know that there's a number of available certified, contact tracing classes you can take online. And it could be a way we could ask our community to support us with in-person school in addition to this testing. I don't know if there's, again, I don't know if it's feasible, but if we were going to make an ask, this seems like one that maybe potentially we could make.
You can register for that through the Pennsylvania Department of Health. They have a portal for that, and I happen to know people that have volunteered for that, but have yet to be contacted for it. So it has to go through the Pennsylvania Department of Health. We don't have the ability to, submit volunteers for that, but I can certainly provide the link for that information as to how one would sign up to be a contact tracer.
Okay, but it's run through the state, not the county?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we couldn't have our set of designees just to support the school district?
I don't believe so, but I will double check that with the Montgomery County Office of Public Health.
Okay, thank you, Terry. I'd
Sure.
appreciate that.
Okay, Ms. Klein?
Hi, thank you. I have two completely unrelated questions. The first is if you could speak a little bit to the K through 5 staying in the hybrid model rather than go back to a fully like the full day model, and sort of the benefits and why that decision was made.
Sure, we talked a little bit about it last week, but I'll look to Dr. Gaudioso to be as eloquent this week as she was last week.
Sure. We had a variety of reasons. One is we've had the phased return has involved multiple schedules in place, and hopefully this is a short-term closure, maintaining the greatest continuity of instruction, the familiar routines for students and for teachers is desirable. What we are finding is that the layers that operate within a school schedule are really critical to supporting students, and these include everything from special areas to reading specialists, math specialists, related services, special education. All of those layered schedules have to change when we change schedules. So given that we're hopeful that this is a short-term closure, we're really trying to prevent upheaval.
Jen, as an example, I know that one of the things you and I talked about a while ago was that in a regular elementary schedule, the different periods like special spirit periods are scattered throughout, so that specialists like the reading intervention, math intervention, and so forth could get to a wider group of students. That's
Exactly.
made more difficult under the first model, as just one example. And so it was reducing the effectiveness of those teachers, correct?
Right. One of the things that we've had to navigate is we're not just sharing staff in some cases across one building or across even the 6 elementary schools. We're now providing services for LMSD at home students, LMVA students, and all of those schedules have been worked out. So trying not to disrupt things was a critical benefit. Another benefit that the teachers and buildings are reporting is that the small groups are really giving the teachers a lot of contact time with the students, and especially as we move into remote, it's echoing the model that we piloted in the summer, where we had these small groups for instruction. The teachers were really able to have a lot of interaction with students in a smaller group, and it can really, they're finding it's helping them maximize the remote instruction. So those were some benefits that led to a decision to maintain for now. Because it really it's maintaining continuity, reducing disruption, and it's really providing some nice supports for students.
And teachers are reporting that they can really do a better job with 10 to 12 students in this environment than if they had 22 to 24 students in this particular environment.
Right.
Okay,
Thank you very much. Can I ask a question about special education?
Sure.
So from what I understand, because we're going virtual tomorrow and that there is a busing issue, that virtual piece includes the special education students. Moving forward, when we are in the 2 weeks of Montgomery County, does that also, does Montgomery County's requirement for closure include special education, or was there perhaps a cutout for those highest need students?
There was no carve out for that.
No, so there's no way, even if we could get our transportation, some level of transportation available for those highest need kids, we still aren't able to do that, unfortunately.
Correct. That's my understanding. Is all schools were closed. There were no exceptions made.
Okay, thank you.
And that's independent parochial.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Now, if there are for this week, if there are special needs students who are out of district, who are now currently being transported by our contracted services, we're continuing to provide that for students. So if there are students, no matter where they are, if they have special needs and they're being transported through the contracted services, we're continuing with that. Am I correct, Mrs. Gray?
Yes, yeah, that's correct.
Correct. And I'm assuming we're comfortable during the 2 weeks that we're out, if there's transportation into Chester County, Delaware County, Philadelphia County, if our people are back, we would comply with that also.
Correct, and if not, we would use contractors.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lee?
Thank you. One follow-up question, Ms. Gaudioso. You mentioned that the intent was to stay with hybrid for the elementary kids. Part of the reason was that we're hoping this is a short-term remote scenario. Would that be different if it was longer term? Like if we knew, say now, that it would be a multi-month remote situation, would we look at full day synchronous for those kids?
I think we would have both on the table and have conversation and really kind of look more closely at the student experience. Some of the feedback that we got in our initial launch to the school year, which went very well. We saw vast improvements from the spring, but it was a lot of screen time for elementary students. We had some feedback that it was too long a day, and the students didn't have a common lunch. So if you were a parent and you have your multiple children at home, they don't have their lunches are staggered. So there were some benefits that we were finding in this hybrid remote that we'd like to explore further. So I think we're really trying to be thoughtful in what's going to be best.
If we went back to the original, we would still be struggling with the issue of those interventionists and how to make use of them. And I think Jen and I and Alexis were also listening to the teachers and the administrators who are telling us that this model is giving them the ability to be more impactful with students than the prior model. But we'll continue to watch it and observe, and we can make a better deal out of it, and we'll make a better deal out of it.
Great. Thank you.
I just want to say on behalf of the board and the community, our thanks, Terry, for all the work that you've done in coordinating between, Montgomery County Public Health, the CHOP Policy Lab, all the different layers of our administration, and also your staff who has been, really just pulling a huge weight. And I know from the very beginning, we had nurses who were helping to deliver food, immediately, making sure that we were doing it in a safe way, and have sort of continued throughout this pandemic with everything you're doing. So I just want to take that opportunity to thank you and your staff as well.
Thank you very much.
And I hope that soon we won't need to need you as much. We're really glad you're here, that we need you now. So, Superintendent Copeland, I think you wanted to move on to the next presentation.
Jason, could you highlight where we are with our athletic program?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Copeland. First, I want to say thank you to the board and the rest of the district administration for all your support with our fall season. It's been a very successful season for both our students, staff, and our community. The plan that we have recommended to you is in line with our Central League plan and adapted from there. Our first practice date for our winter season will start on December 7th. We would be looking at a similar model to what we did in July and August with 2 to 3 workouts per week for each of our teams. The only team who would not be participating in their normal environment would be ice hockey with no on-ice practices. However, we will provide facilities for them to do dry land practices. Our first recommended competition date would not be till the week of January 11th. All of our Central League athletic teams would be on a Central League only schedule for the regular season. All of our other sports teams, or most of our club teams, would be on their association schedule. And that would be ice hockey, if we're able to compete at that time, squash, and then also indoor track is not a Central League sport. The plan that we have provided today also has general and then sports-specific guidance. If you want me to go through that, I can go through those individual pieces.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Is that all right, Dr. Gilbert? If you get
Mm-hmm.
So for the biggest change that we had for the general considerations, and we made this change late in the fall when some of the numbers started to go up, we started requiring masking for all of our student athletes during the entirety of practice, where our previous plan, there were times where they were able to have their masks off during exertion, exercises, or while they were able to be more than 6 feet apart for a significant amount of time. So we've made that change in the fall, and we're going to continue with that change in the winter. The only exception to that during practice would be a socially distanced water break. One of the other changes that we've made is we've purchased electronic whistles for officials to use so that the officials can keep their mask on during an entire competition and not have to take it down to blow their whistle. We're going to continue with the same recommendations we made for the locker room that we had in the fall. Locker rooms will be open for students who are in school to drop their athletic equipment in there, and then to also go in and change before practice. But students will be required to take all their belongings with them after they change out to practice, and they're not able to store things either in the locker room overnight. For boys and girls basketball, the sports-specific recommendations would be that students and staff are masked during competitions with the exception of water breaks. So that would mean that we'd be playing basketball with masks on. We would also eliminate any introductions for the competitions, and that decreases the amount of contact that student athletes are having prior to the competition. For cheerleading, student athletes will be masked during all competitions except for a water break. I talked about ice hockey a little bit before. As of right now, our recommendation is to have dry land workouts only. We will continue to reevaluate hockey status on an ongoing basis if any guidance changes. Boys and girls indoor track are sports-specific recommendations. In the case of inclement weather, whether that is rain, whether that is too cold of a temperature, we would be canceling practices. In a typical year, we would bring those student athletes inside the building to run in the hallways or find another space for them to work out. We're not going to be able to provide that space given the current conditions. So all practices will be outdoors, and then competitions for indoor track will be evaluated as indoor or outdoor sites have become available. So we're continuing to look at options for competitions for those two teams. For boys and girls squash, all staff and student athletes will be masked during competitions. And we've already talked with the Kimwood Club about also reducing the number of student athletes that we have in the facility at one time. For wrestling, all staff and student athletes will be masked during competitions with the exception of socially distanced water breaks and the individual wrestler that is on the mat. We would also eliminate the pre-competition introductions for wrestling as well. For boys and girls swimming, a lot of the information that I included for swimming has to do with the pool deck and locker rooms. There are also recommendations that have come from the PIAA that we will adopt. And basically we split the pool in half. So lanes 1, 2, and 3 would either be the home team or the away team. So half of the facility is for the home team, half of the facility is for the away team. So lanes 4, 5, and 6 would be for either, again, the home or the away team. You split it up based on what works in your facility. For the pool deck, students will enter the pool deck through the exterior doors. One of the reasons that we're doing this is that so students are not coming through the locker rooms, which is the biggest problematic space that we have right now. So we don't want students coming through the locker room. We want them entering through the exterior doors and then coming onto the pool deck. There'll be individual stations for each of the students, both home and away swimmers. They'll have several hooks for their masks, for their towels, and that'll be their individual space for the entire practice or competition. The locker rooms will be able to be used for students to change. Masks will be worn all times in there, and we measured it out. In each of our locker rooms, we can hold approximately 7 student athletes at one time. And there's space for them to do that. We'll have a coach outside monitoring who's going in and who's going out, so that we only have 7 student athletes in there at one time. Masking for swimming. Masks will be worn in the locker room on deck until students reach their individual station and before they're entering the pool. Masks will be put back on once they're able to dry their face, because if you put on the mask while your face is still wet, that actually reduces the efficacy of the mask. So it makes it almost useless if it's wet. All staff out of the pool will be masked at all times, and that includes our lifeguarding staff, our coaches. In the water, students will not be wearing masks. During practices, we'll be able to have 2 students per lane. You start on opposite ends of the lane and you swim in a circular motion, so either clockwise or counterclockwise, so that there's not a lot of crossover while you're in the water. Our plan also included the CHOP, the most recent CHOP sport-specific guidance. And that was the same guidance that we had when we made the change to student athletes who play football being able to be back in school. So that's the most recent guidance that we have. That has the 9% threshold is the threshold for the positivity rate. Or if there's also rapidly accelerating community transmission, that's also part of the threshold. And basically what that says is under 9% positivity rate, or if we're not rapidly accelerating in the community, that you're able to have all sports practicing. Again, we've made some individual changes for some of our specific sports, but that you're able to do at least workouts, and we're going to continue to evaluate any changes that need to be made for individual teams as time goes on. And then any guidance that changes that come from CHOP, we will, or elsewhere, we'll implement and adjust our plan as needed, and then continue to monitor the conditions to be able to make decisions whether we're able to compete or practice or not.
Thanks, Jason. I think you can see that the staff has really gone into great detail to try and make this a safe and enjoyable experience. And I'll give both Jason and Tom Ferguson kudos for the hard work that they put in it. And particularly, we were all pleased when Jason ran across an official who wouldn't put his mask on, and he was out there and threw him off the property and sent him packing. So, keeping the kids safe is what it's about. With that, any questions?
Thank you for the presentation and for all of your work. Are there any questions from the board? Sean Mooring, I'm sorry, I saw, Sean, did you have a question?
I did. I just wanted to, I definitely appreciate all of the work that the staff have put into, coming up with this plan and really being diligent about it. But I guess still just a few concerns, just given our conversation with the folks at CHOP last week, where the medical recommendation continues to be not moving forward with sports at this time. And then also just a concern, even with the mask wearing for a sport like basketball, as Jason shared, once the masks become wet, they're a lot less effective. So, I mean, just the going through the process of playing basketball, you're sweating profusely, so that you be constantly changing masks. So it just again continues to be a major concern for me, even with the safety precautions.
Carrie, did you want to respond to that? You look like you.
Well, I think we're under the assumption that we would be monitoring the incidence and positivity and conferring with CHOP prior to restarting any sports. I believe that they're coming out with some updated guidance, hopefully this week. It would seem that with the rapidly rising incidence rate that we're seeing and potentially in-school-based transmission right now, you would want to limit to the conditioning and workouts and so forth. So as Jason said, I think all of this would be done while monitoring the situation and conferring with the public health people as to the safety of it. So this is depending on whether it is a stable situation to proceed.
And we're starting. We're contemplating or targeting that second week in January for competition. That could change if the situation warrants it. We really had pretty good experience with the fall sports, and albeit they're outdoors, I should hasten to add that we're taking some further precautions for our indoor sports, and in our large gyms, we're looking to put in that bipolar ionization, which we believe will also add an additional layer of support for our student athletes and staff.
Hey,
I was going to say, Mr. Warren,
sure. Go ahead.
For also the masks, our athletic departments have been provided with the surgical masks. So if students' masks do become wet or unusable during a competition, our athletic training staff is able to provide them with a mask if it's seeming wet or if it's not gonna work. So that is part of our plan. If something like that would happen, during a basketball game or any other sport.
Thank you.
And my understanding also is that it's the off-field and off-court activities that are also critical in reducing transmission, whether it's locker rooms, carpools, buses, parking lots. That's all been identified as areas where transmission is as likely as on the field or on the court. So that is something we'll have to look at carefully as well.
I mean, the idea is to cool down the situation as much as we can over the next couple of weeks so that we can come back and participate.
Okay, thank you. Peter Lee?
Thank you. I was wondering, and I don't know, maybe this is for you, Ms. Quinlan, or you, Mr. Copeland. The 9% positivity rate, what's the time frame for the evaluation of that? Like, based on the current trend line, we'll be over 9% possibly next week in Montgomery County. How long do we need to be under 9% before we could consider, competition again, based on the, next week potentially we would be above the threshold for competition, how long would we need to be down below that in order to reopen competition? And then what happens if we're sort of like hovering on that 9% line and we, spike up and spike down and spike up and spike down?
Terry, I think you can, I mean, I don't know that it moves quite that way. It tends to move straight up or leveled, or you want to speak to that, Terry?
Well, I think you'd want to see a decreasing trend below 9%, because 9% often means like an uncontrollable transmission in the community. And you certainly would want to see it go below that. And you would want to look at the other factors. Are you seeing the incidence rate go down as well? Because I don't think you can look at the positivity in isolation of the other factors. So you wouldn't want to see this rising. You'd want to see a decrease and a stabilization of the incidence rate. And you'd also want to look at the level of in-school transmission. So you want to be sure that we're at a place where that in-school transmission isn't occurring.
Okay, thank you. One other unrelated question. As far as mask wearing goes during competitions, will that just be for Lower Merion students, or are we able to mandate that the other team wear masks as well?
So we're able to mandate and ask a team that we would be going to compete against to wear a mask. So far, our Central League partners have been very flexible in if you ask them to wear a mask, they will wear a mask for a certain.
So as a home game, we can ask.
Also away now.
Okay, good.
So Radnor School District, I want to say 2 weeks ago, had sent out a message to our league asking, if you're going to be able to play Radnor in XYZ sport, you're going to need to wear a mask. So there were all positive responses to that. So if we ask other teams to do that, they would do that. I will tell you that our league for our indoor sports is considering masking indoors as detailed in our plan. The two sports that you really can't wear a mask like in competition would be swimming. Obviously, we're in the water. And then the other one is wrestling while you're out on the mat in your live wrestling match.
Great, thank you.
Lori Ackman.
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize I could unmute myself. Thank you. And thanks to you, Jason, and the athletics department. I had a son and a daughter both compete in fall sports, and I felt it was very well managed and safe, and everyone participated. So thank you. And if conditions allow, I think this is a very thoughtful plan. I just had two quick questions. I didn't see, or maybe I missed it, what the spectator policy would or would not be. So I would love to hear that. And also, would we consider potentially using some of these tests maybe to help ensure the sports teams remain healthy?
So I can talk about the spectators. So the spectator plan that we adopted in the previous plan, which was each student athlete on our team gets 2 passes, and then we're able to have seniors on the opposing team. We have a league pass. They would get 2 passes as well to our indoor sports. However, this would exclude swimming. And the reason that we're not able to have spectators in swimming is because we're going to have to use that gallery space as individual stations for student athletes to have their towel, their mask, their belongings on the deck out there, so that we're not because we're not able to use the locker rooms like we previously were able to use them. One of the things we are considering is trying to live stream our swimming events. We have started to live stream volleyball and would plan to do that for basketball. We're going to try to get it going in swimming for our indoor sports as well, and wrestling.
And for the second part of the question, I think it will depend on the amount of tests that they're able to procure for us.
Okay.
But I do think we discussed early on making sure that student athletes had the test. But again, we've had conversations, but until they sit down and sort of draw up the protocols, we'd be guessing.
Okay, thank you.
Shayna Kalish. Thank you, Dr. Gilbert. I don't particularly have a question. I just wanted to express my concern. I think this plan is really exceptionally well thought out and planned to the best of our ability. But at this point, Dr. Rubin of the CHOP Policy Lab has told us explicitly that sports should not be having contact right now, that everything should be individual, that we're having to close because we're having outbreaks, that we're ramping up to the holidays and things are getting worse. And I really am prioritizing our ability to keep our students in school. And I'm worried about adding another avenue for exposure to our student population and our staff members. And I find the idea of doing indoor sports at this point really concerning, frankly.
I think as I recall, what he was saying is you do your conditioning now and not competition. And we're hoping that the competition part will be viable when we're looking to do the competition back in or up to second week of January. Did I get that right, Terry?
I think so, but I also believe they're coming out with more specific guidance this week too.
Okay, Lucy Klein.
Thank you. I will start with following up on Mr. Copeland's comment. That was the way I understood it as well, was that workouts now were fine. And at this point that there shouldn't be competition, hoping that in the future that the numbers would be better and that we would be able to. I have a couple of sort of specific questions. One around, does diving fall under swimming? Is it swimming and diving?
Yes, it is swimming and diving.
Okay. And can you speak a little bit to the ice hockey difference in terms of dry land workout only versus being on the ice? Is that partially because we can't control the environment of the ice rinks, or sort of what's driving that difference?
My understanding is that it was the cold nature and the aerosol nature of moving around the ice, and both CHOP and the county were really down on the issue of ice hockey. Terry, Jason, do you remember?
Yeah, so I explored that a little more too, and in addition to that, it was the three other factors: the unavoidable close contact that you have in ice hockey, the heavy breathing that occurs in ice hockey that, kind of aerosolized and the droplets kind of hang in that colder environment, and the inability to mask with some of the traditional masks. And even if some of those half masks are used, they're not effective for the amount of exertion and the heavy breathing that occurs in ice hockey.
Okay, thank you. Another quick question. This is for high school. Is there any consideration of middle school doing something like the middle schools did this fall, where they just work out and then possibly play each other?
So at this point across our league, none of our partners in the Central League are going to be competing in interscholastic middle school sports. However, a lot of them are doing an intramural program that we did at our middle schools this fall.
Thank you. And then I'd like to just finish with a comment or a thought around one of the things that we talked about over the summer and in the fall when we were talking about sports was the equity issue. And without having high school sports, that, you know, some students might be able to afford to turn to private travel leagues, but for some other students, this might be their only opportunity to play. And I just wanted to bring that up again, because I think that that's an important piece. And I also am more comfortable with the idea of the high schools with the school-based athletics being much more highly regulated than some of the travel teams, where there isn't sort of a governing body that says you must follow these rules. And I think that that's a very big difference between school sports and travel sports. Especially if we sort of mandate and make sure that our students are masked during workouts and during competitions and things like that, where there's no one governing that in the travel team sport. And so I do think that the environment is slightly different, although I do understand the concerns about indoor sports certainly, but I just wanted to make that.
Sure, and both the health professionals at CHOP and Montgomery expressed similar concern about travel.
Mm-hmm. Right, which would mean we should be asking our families to be responsible about that. Ms. Finger?
Is she muted?
I don't see her at all.
So I thought I had clicked on mute, but I clicked lower hand instead. So
okay,
one for two. I have two questions. One is about the team compact that could potentially be compacts within teams or groups. Is this something that is done that students and their families are signing? That's my one question. I know when my son played lacrosse, there was nothing that was going to stand in the way of him getting to a competition, not even prom. He was up and back at our house by 8:30 in the morning when they made the playoffs. So I'm just curious how, what kinds of conversations are happening between the coaches and the students around their outside of school behavior. And then my second question is, with CHOP policy coming up with new guidelines or this week, or a different recommendation this week, at what point would we potentially listen to their guidelines the way we're listening to them for the school portion of the program?
We think we are listening at this point. And I think as the guidelines change, we've tried to adapt to the guidelines. If you'll remember in the fall when we departed from the guidelines, and I asked football because of the strict guidelines that if we were going to play and if we were going to deviate, then the players would stay in remote. Mm-hmm. And then the guidelines changed significantly, and so we allowed the football players to come into school. So we are cognizant of the guidelines. If something occurs this week that deviates, this policy allows me to make some changes before I come back to you as a board.
Thank you.
I was going to say, I can speak to the compacts and the conversations that are happening with our coaches. So all of our coaches, we provided a resource actually through the CHOP Policy Center that just really highlights good behaviors for student athletes on our teams, positive behaviors for them to take if they're going to be part of a team. We did have some of our teams sign that, our student athletes. They also took that home as well. And then more importantly, I think the conversations that our coaches are having almost on a daily basis about positive behaviors about mask wearing, about social distancing, about what they're doing for social events, or if social events are coming up. They're really being proactive and having those conversations on an almost daily basis at this point, or as things come up, so that student athletes are hearing that from their coaches and also their teammates, I would say. That's also been a big part of those conversations.
Thank you.
I just, I'll go last here. I just have to say that while I really do appreciate all of the work that you've done, Jason, and that everybody's doing, the coaches, and I just, Terry, I'm really concerned about that 9% positivity rate. I mean, that increased dramatically in terms of the CHOP policy guidelines. And I think that if we were at 9%, if we were at 8% positivity rate, we would be talking about shutting down school, I think. So it's just really confusing to me, frankly. And it's very confusing to me. And I don't know much, I'm not a big sports person, but like I'm really having trouble imagining wrestling without some type of testing. And I'm sure you could say the same thing about other things, but I don't know. But I will just focus on that 9% positivity rate and that change in the CHOP policy guidelines.
Yeah, I don't think that 9% was meant as a standalone. I think it was or a rising incidence rate too. So I think that all of these factors have to be considered, and hopefully we'll see that stabilization over the next couple of weeks. I don't know what will happen, but I think we'll have to continually monitor it and be prepared to make adjustments depending on what we're seeing.
And I think we've got to really hope that the community takes the surge seriously, thinks about Thanksgiving, thinks about family gatherings, particularly family gatherings inside. We did have it wasn't all Halloween, but there were some issues there. And the weather's too cold for that to repeat itself. That's what I'm getting from the health professionals.
And could I speak to wrestling specifically? So for wrestling specifically, I do believe that it can be done safely. There has been more club wrestling happening in the last 6 months than maybe ever before. Because it's not regulated and it's outside of the school system. For wrestling, on our teams at Harriton and Lower Merion, typically we have about 15 to 20 student athletes. As a wrestler, you typically train with 2 to 3 people, and those are the same 2 to 3 people throughout your entire season. So I think we can really portion off our wrestling rooms so that you have limited contact. I also believe that when you're in a wrestling match, you're exposed to one other person on that mat, and you're about 20 to 25 feet from anyone else in the gym except for the official. But you do have a lot more limited contact in wrestling when you're talking about the number of contacts that you have over even some of our other sports.
Okay, well, thank you for explaining that to me. That's helpful. Okay, I think, let's see. Are there, Deborah, did you have another question?
Yes, one more. One of the recommendations that we heard from the policy lab last week was move winter sports to the spring if you can. What's the feasibility for any of our winter sports potentially being pushed later on?
I think the problem is if we could move it to the spring, but if nobody moves to the spring with us, we're by ourselves in the spring.
Is there any conversation within the Central League of moving some if
I don't
we,
believe so. Is there, Jason? I'm
Uh,
trying not to ask Mr. Hughes any questions.
No, not currently. And, based on history that we've seen so far, the PIAA has not moved any of their seasons back. They have provided some other options for teams. However, I don't see a wholesale move for winter sports later. And, we found that was not the case with our fall sports.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stroop and Ms. Quinlan. And I think we
And Mr.
are,
Hughes was here, and just in case you
Thank you,
needed a
Mr.
principal
Hughes.
perspective, and I'm glad,
we appreciate it.
thanks for coming down. I'd run if I were you.
Yes. Okay. We're going to move on to the committee meeting reports. So these committees meet once a week, and they describe a lot of the action items that we'll be voting on later were discussed. They were all discussed in committee meetings. And so that's why we do these reports, so that everybody can hear a summary of the discussion. So we'll start with the curriculum committee meeting report by Ms. Finger.
Mr. Mooring is going to read it this evening. It was a last moment change. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mooring.
Sure. Thank you. So the curriculum committee met on November 4th. In attendance was Superintendent Copeland, Mr. Copeland, Dr. McGloin, Ms. Finger, myself, Shannon Kalish, Lucy Klein, Amy Buckman, Nancy, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Akanumesa, Jennifer Gadio. Good. Jennifer Gaudioso, Leslie Pratt, Jennifer Goldberg, Jason Lilly, Sean Hughes, Lorraine DeRosa, Kimberly Frazier, Rich Marta, Dr. Paul, George Frazier, and from the community, Alice Liu Brown and Cheryl Masterman. The course and text proposals were presented by Dr. Pratt, discussed the psychology AP course, thinking about psychology, which is will replace the 2010 text, global studies 1 and 2, and we'll be using a book called Voyages. And the digital license, we will also be looking to purchase the digital licenses for the last 6 years, which is up for renewal. We also have a contract continuing our partnership with the Impact Center that we began last year as part of our Global Citizens course. We're also building learning experiences in place of purchasing a textbook, as students will participate within the community. While COVID-19 still has us working socially distanced, the students are doing this virtually through the Impact Center. The cost is $80 per student who is appropriately placed. If students cannot be placed, we do not pay. Next, we had a presentation by Dr. Gaudioso and Ms. Goldberg on Seesaw and the Google Classroom. Seesaw has fostered engagement and dialogue with our students. It's an online system. It was originally purchased in 2017 as part of our digital portfolio initiative piece for our student-driven schools. In 2018 was the creation of the Me folder that travels with the student over grade levels. We also saw Seesaw was used in grades 3 to 5 and K to 2. In 2021, all K-5 all classrooms are using it as a powerful tool a powerful learning tool, more than as primarily a digital tool, because it has many uses around the area of curriculum. The Google Classroom is fully used in K-5 classrooms. Students and families land there and are directed out to various activities. I won't go through all of these, and then also had a presentation by Mr. Hughes and Mr. Lilly and Dr. McGloin on redefining success pathways, and just an update on that. The goal of redefining success is to transform how we design, measure, and report student achievement with a focus on each student's individualized growth and mastery. We discussed the cumulative quarterless grading is the one way that we're doing this. We're doing it for several reasons. One, it mitigates stress about the end of quarter projects, tests, and kids usually have teachers that try to get in one more grade. So we're trying to alleviate some of that pressure. Students benefit academically with this model. It also makes grading much fairer and more consistent. One, we had to change reporting for was a question of whether or not we had to change reporting for cumulative grading. One of the key things with the cumulative grading is there's no separate midterm or final. It allows us to more evenly place grading throughout the year, and we will still have checkpoints with students throughout the quarters, so that we'll be able to reflect that grade even minus the midterm and final. And we will be able to continue with the process of reporting for college applications that may be looking for quarter grades. Also are looking at the policy around valedictorian and salutatorian and class rank. We are in the process of de-emphasizing class rank, beginning with the class of 2025, removing valedictorian and salutatorian, and switching to Latin designations of summa and magna cum laude. This was originally planned for the class of 2024, but COVID impacted that process, and we've pushed it down to the class of 2025. And then lastly, we talked about the roadmap and recommended that we start the cum laude. We'll begin with the class of 2023, our current sophomore class. December 2020, we'll update the policy 213 and administrative regs with regard to high school grading, and revisit the grading philosophy with the academic council. In winter 2020, we will finalize the grading philosophy with the constituent groups. And in summer 2023, we will update policy 213. The next meeting of the curriculum committee will be held via Zoom on December 2nd at 8:30 a.m. And that concludes our report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mooring. We're going to have a report of the November 6th Policy Committee meeting by Ms. Klein.
Hi, thank you. So during the November 2020 meeting, the board's policy committee continued its review of policies and administrative regulations. We had two overall updates and overviews. One is a follow-up to Mr. Mooring's report about that the curriculum committee continues to work on grading of student progress, which is policy 213, as part of the ongoing implementation of the strategic plan. And so the proposed changes, as he discussed, to policy 213 are expected to be discussed at the upcoming December policy meeting. And second, the policy committee will continue to work in tandem with the ad hoc committee on equity and anti-racism on not only the equity policy, but also in creating a framework or rubric to ensure that we look through an equity lens for every policy that we consider. In addition, policy 235, students' rights and responsibilities, will also be reviewed in tandem with the equity policy, as it includes the student code of conduct. We reviewed policy 104, the equal opportunity employment policy, was reviewed for a second reading. For first readings, we looked at policy AR 354, 454, 554. They're all sort of interrelated, in 831, maintaining appropriate boundaries with students, which was reviewed and updated to include language to make this applicable to include board members broadly, mostly because we're including our student representatives on the board. Policy 714, the use of natatorium, was discussed for repeal as it will be included in other updated policies. Policy 822, screening of employees and contractors, was reviewed with no significant changes recommended. Some other additional following policies that were reviewed with no substantive changes and therefore don't need to move forward for a second read include policy 830, the comprehensive environmental impact reduction plan, policy 716, integrated pest management, policy 717, use of AEDs, automatic external defibrillators, and policy 720, employee personal use of district property. The next policy committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, December 4th at 8:30 a.m.
Thank you very much, Ms. Klein. We'll now have a report of the November 11th Ad Hoc Committee for Equity and Anti-Racism. And Mr. Mooring, you're up again.
Thank you. All right, so on November 11th, the Ad Hoc Committee on Equity and Anti-Racism met via Zoom. The meeting was opened by myself with a brief welcome and overview of our agenda, which included a series of detailed presentations by the administration. The first report was given by Megan Schaefer, who provided an overview of district policies, including where to find them, how they are organized, and the process for the board and administration to consider and adopt new policies. Ms. Schaefer then reviewed how the administration organizes some of its key policies in areas such as culture and climate, standards and expectations, inclusivity and belonging. Ms. Schaefer then briefly reviewed the process being undertaken to develop the administration's equity policy and how the district intends to apply and maintain an equity lens as we develop new and review existing policies. Ms. Schaefer shared that our internal schedule is to work with the ad hoc committee and policy committee to review and refine the definition and initial series of questions at our next policy meeting on December 4th. Ms. Schaefer intends to have a protocol or a reference guide for the equity lens that we will use to examine policies over the course of the first quarter of 2021. The next presentation was made by Dr. Christina Paul to provide an update of the internal equity audit process. Dr. Paul reviewed the definition of an equity audit and the various resources for conducting an audit that are currently under consideration. The district is currently examining 4 different potential self-assessment tools, including 2 that also offer technical assistance. There are also 4 potential external auditors under consideration. Dr. Paul noted that there are a number of pros and cons associated with each approach and also solicited additional suggestions if there were any offered by those in attendance. The next steps include finalizing our approach, be that self-audit, external, or blended approach, determining our priorities, implementing the audit, and the development of the implementation of an action plan based on the results. Dr. Paul also extended an invitation to the members of the ad hoc committee and those in participation to participate in the Achievement Imperative Task Force Equity Audit Subcommittee, which is where this process is being driven out of. The next presentation was provided by Dr. McGloin, who shared an update of the cultural proficiency and anti-racism curriculum efforts. Dr. McGloin revisited the goals, which include to develop a student-centered school cultural proficiency goals aligned with the professional development plans to support action towards those goals, and also to improve curriculum and instruction through equity review and resource development and refinement. A brief update on this elementary and secondary levels was one for at the elementary level. A highlight from the elementary presentation was that there was a cross-district implementation of cultural proficiency lesson 1 on November 12th. At the secondary level, there was the continued development of the Black Excellence Politics, Economics, and Culture of American People course that continues to progress. I also noted in my notes that I actually was copied on a email today that went out to students seeking their input on that course in the review process of that. We also received, the last presentation was a update from Mr. Taj Bird, who is the new Student Empowerment Coordinator / Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Liaison. And he shared his work around student empowerment initiatives. And he began by providing an overview of his role, which is to empower students of color through the facilitation of programs vertically and horizontally aligned. Mr. Bird described some of his work that was achieved by the Lower Merion High School Core 15 group that convened this summer in direct response to the global reckoning in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd. This group organized a rally and protest on Arnold Field, led a student-led town hall, and established an ongoing relationship with recent alumni. And those are just some of the highlights of the work they did over the summer. This group disbanded as the school year came, as they evolved and created new organizations that they launched and are engaging with, including the Lower Merion High School Council for Racial Equity and Inclusivity, the Lower Merion and Harriton Black Student Union. It's up and running at Lower Merion and on its way at Harriton. Another group that is partial to some of the support and advocates called I Will Breathe. Lower Merion High School Diversity Councils are also being developed. And Mr. Bird also shared updates on some of the other student empowerment activities, such as the planned expansion of Lmsb into Lower Merion High School and middle schools. Welsh Valley Middle School Student Government's anti-racism student-led organization is being developed, and also facilitating the annual Black Professionals Career Week. Mr. Bird finished up his presentation by sharing some of the work around staff development, including the Anti-Racist Coalition at both high schools, which was developed to create a safe space to engage in learning, collaboration, and conversations among faculty, staff, students, and alumni to discuss how to best support students of color. And then as we closed, we obviously ran out of time as we had some really great presentations, but did make sure that Mr. Copeland shared an invitation for our participants to become more civically engaged, not only with their participation in the ad hoc committee, but also throughout the community, including but not limited to our civic associations, the NAACP Education Committee, as well as our various district task force and opportunities within HSA and other committees. And that's my report.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Mooring. Our last report will be the November 12th Facilities and Purchasing Committee meeting by Mr. Lee.
Thank you. The following agenda items were discussed on our November 12th Facilities and Purchasing Committee meeting and recommended for approval by the committee for discussion and vote at today's board meeting. We reviewed and recommended for approval the list of bills. We reviewed and recommended for approval 2 contracts with Bedford, Freeman, and Worth, $34,594 for AP Psychology textbooks, $12,778.56 for psychology textbooks for college prep and honors courses. We reviewed and recommended for approval the following additional agenda items: a renewal with Presidio Network Solutions for $166,059.41 for Cisco SmartNet licensing and support to support district network equipment. A renewal with E+ for $15,250.44 for subscription for Barracuda email archiver services. A proposal from PICO for the installation of electric service at the site of the new middle school at an estimated cost of $573,000 plus or minus 40%. The scope of work is included in the project planning for the middle school construction project and requires a deposit of $57,300 for PICO to proceed with their engineering design plans. We reviewed and recommended 2 change orders for S.J. Thomas Company for approval. One was an increase of $4,017.06 to the scope of the installation of the bus parking gate at Welsh Valley Middle School due to parking lot slope. Excuse me. A decrease of $409.81 to the scope of the installation of the additional bus parking screening at Welsh Valley Middle School due to the unavailable of 2 plantings. These plantings will be completed by district staff in the spring. We received 2 project updates, one on the new middle school. Summaries of the agreements for the easements needed to support construction have been drafted and are expected to be shared with the board in December or January. And now that the building pad has been installed, work on the building foundation is underway. We received an update on the air quality project as well. A recommendation was made to increase the scope of the bipolar ionization project to include the main competition gyms at the 2 high schools to increase safety for players and fans during indoor sports. The committee reviewed and recommended for approval the amendment to the agreement with Reynolds Energy Service to support the bipolar ionization scope increase to include the main competition gyms at the 2 high schools. The incremental cost will be $42,553, bringing the total cost of the bipolar ionization project to $262,553. The next Facilities and Purchasing Committee meeting will be on Thursday, December 17th, 2020 at 8:30 a.m.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. At this point, we're going to move to audience recognition. So we'll take public comment on any issue. It doesn't have to be just on the agenda items. You can give us a comment on or a question on any issue through the chat feature. Please provide your name and where you reside within the district in order for your comment to be read aloud. And Ms. LaPera is going to get this set up for us.
Okay, Mike, will you bring up the clock? Thank you. And the chat feature is now open.
Thank you, Ms. LaPera.
Thank you.
And Mr. Purvick. Okay, welcome back, everyone. This is the board meeting. Mr. Roos, can you please read the public comments now?
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
First is from Jamie Selway, Haverford. Has the president considered an advisory committee of parents to provide community input feedback to inform the board's decision-making? Given that COVID will be with us longer than expected, anything to make governance more transparent and inclusive is welcome. Also, the president should include expert advice on the cost to our community of in-person school, both in terms of learning challenges and disproportionately negative effects on our neediest citizens. Dr. Rubin is an excellent resource, but he is focused on the health and safety benefits of virtual instruction. The costs are real and worth public discussion to provide balance and informed decision-making. Next, Alana Weinstein, Winwood. I want to express my disappointment in the limited instruction being provided to our elementary school students. 10 hours of instruction over 4.5 days for our youngest learners is a disgrace for a school district that reportedly prides itself on a commitment to excellence and continuous improvement. Next is Christina Chang, Penn Valley. Regarding testing, are we certain positive results are not automatically reported by Montgomery County Department of Health to the Lower Merion School District? Will LMSD consider privately contracting with Mako Medical to offer on-site PCR testing in all LM schools? When can we expect an update with further details on the CHOP rapid testing? I heard there was a sports team related compact. Can we extend the quote compact to be signed by all MS middle school and high school students and all parents in grades K to 12?
Can you repeat the question about reporting things from, I think it was the second statement?
Will LMSD consider privately, I'm sorry, are we certain positive results are not automatically reported by Monco Department of Health to LMSD? Will LMSD consider privately contracting with
That was the
Mako-
part. That was the part. I got that. Yeah. No. Yeah, we are certain that they're not automatically transmitted.
Okay. Next is Jen Cohen, Winwood. The first day of the hybrid remote elementary school schedule today worked very well for us compared to the full day synchronous schedule we used for remote learning prior to school opening. Full day sounded better on paper, but the result was a very long draining day. My son was much more engaged and enthusiastic, and the smaller class size allowed the teacher to engage more with the class as well. Last comment, Ruth Jenkins, Winwood. Sports seems to have taken priority over everything. Our students are home and we are putting athlete students in jeopardy as well as their families. While students have to stay home for their and other safety, athletes are allowed to participate in dangerously close contact activities. What is wrong with this picture? That concludes public comment.
Just on the testing, we don't have all the protocols from the CHOP yet. And so, unfortunately, Terry had to leave, but we have looked at partnerships. We think this is probably the best partnership we can have. So we're anxious to see how that turns out.
I think, I can't remember who it was. Somebody asked about whether the board president was considering an advisory committee. We do have parents who are involved on a committee that Mr. Copeland maybe can talk about.
We haven't actually used the forum, if that's what you mean, where we had the, in the early stages.
I thought you had in the health and safety, there were parents on that committee, at least at one
I think that's
point.
staff at this point. That's staff.
Okay. Well, we can take that into consideration. Certainly. I don't know why I thought that there were some parents initially on those
Initially,
committees. Am I thinking about the wrong committee?
No. Initially, what we had a parent focus group that we brought in weekly before we started school.
I see. Okay, so there was a separate piece of that was a focus group. So,
right. Part of the challenge is the speed with which we have to operate when we get information, and we have to move pretty deliberately.
No, I thank you for the clarification. I knew there was a group. I should not have called them formally the committee. Were there any other comments you wanted to respond to, Mr. Copeland?
I think I tried to get to the questions as opposed to.
Okay.
I mean, I think overall we've tried to really have a number of different approaches, but we don't have the ability to have an unlimited number of approaches. As you've heard tonight, some people like the current hybrid, others like the prior hybrid. Again, I think it's important at this point. We hear from parents all the time, and we also hear from our staff and our teachers. And when they're feeling success with a particular program, I think it's important to at least play that out for a while.
Great. And can you please, and I actually meant to ask this question earlier when we were discussing the athletics, and I thank Ms. Jenkins for reminding me. Can you please tell us a little bit about the other after school activities that are being done with other students, not necessarily athletic? I know that those activities are considered under the umbrella of the health and safety plan, but can you please?
Well, actually they all are, and sometimes I make the mistake too of referring to our athletic folks, Jason and Tom Ferguson, as athletic directors. They're really athletic and activity directors, and so they're also responsible for the school plays, they're responsible for the bands, orchestras, they're responsible for the all of the Science Olympiad. All of that falls under those two gentlemen, and they are working also with them. Some of them are virtual. Some are easy to be virtual, like some of the student newspapers. Some of them are more difficult to be virtual, like robotics. And they are working with those also. And I'll next time they're here, I'll make it a more pointed.
Yeah, I should have asked earlier. wanted
do
to
that.
highlight that.
But I know they are working on those. I don't know, is Dr. McGloin, are you more versed in this than I am?
And we just talked about it, I believe, at our last meeting. I know they're definitely having meetings, and it's both virtual, and I think there might be some in person, but primarily virtual. It is happening.
Okay, all right. Well, it would be good to get an update on that as well. Thank you. Okay. Oh, Mr. Copeland, I'm supposed to turn it over to you for the
Right, I think we're going
health
to
and safety
separate out the health and safety.
Yes, that's the one we need to do right now.
If it's all right with Mr. Roos, I'm going to read the beginning of it, not the whole thing. Does that suffice, Mr. Roos?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so the administration recommends that the Board of School Directors approves the amended LMSD PIAA Athletic Health and Safety Plan as attached, and authorizes the superintendent or designate to submit it if necessary to the Pennsylvania Department of Education in a form and manner prescribed by the Pennsylvania Department of Education.
And we had our discussion earlier in order to ensure that some of our folks were able to get home at a reasonable time after long days. But are there any other questions at this time? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. LaPera, can you please do a roll call vote? I think we're going to need it on this one.
Yes, I already had it prepared. And can I just please ask who seconded that motion? Because it didn't come up for me.
I did, Deborah.
Thank you, Deborah.
Okay.
Ms. Finger, you're first. Ms. Finger.
No.
You seconded it and then you voted no? Is that?
Oh, don't we have to have the motion?
Yes.
Come out anyway?
Okay. All right. Sorry. I just got confused. Okay. That's fine. Go ahead.
Ms. Klein.
Yes.
Ms. Kalish.
No.
Mr. Lee.
Yes.
Mr. Mooring.
No.
Mr. Driscoll.
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
No.
Ms. Ackman.
Yes.
And Dr. Gilbert.
No.
That is 4 in favor and 5 against. The motion does not pass.
Okay.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to ask for a motion for the agenda to be approved by consent. The action items on the agenda were reviewed in committee and reported out this evening. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Shayna. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Deborah. Can all the board members just unmute, please? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? The motion passes. Okay, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Roos for the Sunshine Act.
Thank you. There are executive sessions to announce occurring on November 9th regarding litigation, and also November 16th, November 16th involving litigation and land use litigation.
Okay, Ms. LaPera, can you please read the upcoming meeting dates?
Yes. December 7th is our reorganization of the board meeting. That'll be at 8 p.m. and via Zoom. December 21st is our regular business board meeting, also at 8 p.m. via Zoom. Then we'll have the committee meeting starting at 8:30 unless otherwise noticed. November 18th, communications at 7 p.m. December 2nd, curriculum, December 4th, policy, December 9th, ad hoc committee for equity and anti-racism at 7 p.m. and December 17th, facilities and purchasing committee meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. LaPera. Thank you for all of your assistance. I hope everybody has a very safe Thanksgiving. And with that, we are adjourned.